Hello everyone! Thank you for visiting our channel. Have you ever experienced such like stories? James was the oldest child in his family, and a year after his birth, his mother gave birth to his sister, Emily. They were inseparable throughout their lives, and adults would often joke that their mother simply carried the second twin for another year. The only time they were separated was when Emily got married to Matthew, whom James didn't like and found unpleasant. In fact, he even compared Matthew to a snake. At Emily's wedding, she wished her brother would get married soon so that they could be friends with their families. Laughing, James promised to work on it. Later, while he was at work, he met Caitlin, and he and his friends even bet on whether or not she would respond to their attempts to talk to her. For the first 6 months, Caitlin successfully ignored any compliments and invitations to go out. But at the New Year's corporate party, she approached James herself and offered to go somewhere. Many years have passed since then, and now James and Caitlin are married and planning to have a child. Caitlin left her job for a better paying one, and everything is going as they both always wanted. Sometimes, while lying in a dark room before sleep, they discussed how everything was falling into place and how satisfying it was to be tied to the same person. One day, James's sister Emily called him and invited him to have lunch together. James agreed happily. Emily had recently started a new job, and they had less time to spend together. When they met in a cafe, Emily poked at her food with her fork, showing no appetite. James asked her worriedly what was wrong. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering, "I think Matthew is seeing someone." At first, James tried to convince his sister otherwise, but she provided more and more arguments, and he had to admit that there was some truth in her words. Then, out of nowhere, Emily suddenly asked James if he had ever thought that Caitlin might be seeing someone. He nervously laughed and answered negatively, insisting that his Caitlin would never do that to him. However, this conversation with Emily kept spinning in his head, and he began to feel like Caitlin was hiding something from him. He became nervous when she came home late or didn't answer his calls for a long time. James even thought about leaving a bug to eavesdrop on his wife, but he talked himself out of it. If James doesn't get to the bottom of this, there will be nothing left of the trust he had in his wife. His suspicions of her infidelity arose when Caitlin arrived home with a bouquet of flowers. She explained that they were from a colleague, whose birthday it was that day. She couldn't take all the flowers home, so she shared one bouquet with Caitlin. The explanation seemed convincing and eased James's anxiety somewhat. He didn't notice anything else unusual about her, and eventually he forgot his intrusive thoughts. But one day, a friend called James and told him they had seen Caitlin in the middle of the day at a cafe in the shopping center. This sparked James's anxiety again, and he asked Caitlin that evening, "How is work going?" She replied that everything was good, and they were preparing for a new project. James hesitated to ask about the shopping center, but eventually he blurted out, "What were you doing today in the middle of the day at the cafe?" Caitlin was surprised but didn't show any concern. "Did you see me?" she asked. "No, my friend called me. I thought you were with them." Caitlin explained that she and her colleague had taken a break from work to have lunch and treat themselves. However, a seed of doubt had already taken root in James's mind and began to grow. One day, Emily called her brother to ask him to pick up some documents from their house. Matthew was on shift, so James went to the apartment where his sister and her husband lived. As he pulled up, he saw Matthew's car, which surprised him, but he assumed Matthew didn't use it to go to work. However, when he tried to unlock the apartment door with his key, it was already unlocked. James muttered curses under his breath towards his sister, but he soon realized that the problem wasn't with her. As soon as James opened the door, he heard romantic music playing and saw that the curtains were drawn, creating a semi-darkness. Emily was right. Matthew definitely had someone, and she had reason to worry. James's thoughts were interrupted by the sight of familiar shoes, a purse, and a coat lying on the edge of the sofa. He felt a shiver run down his spine, and he wondered what was happening. He was well acquainted with these things, and there was only one explanation for it. They belonged to his wife. James felt a chill run down his spine, causing him to tremble. What on earth is happening here? The man rushed to the master bedroom and pulled the door towards him. As with the entrance, it was unlocked, and a surprise awaited James in the room. Caitlin lying on the bed with Matthew on top of her. James had a few seconds to consider what to do, but his hand instinctively reached for his phone, and he managed to take some pictures of the intimate scene. Matthew lunged at him with his fists, but James was able to push him away. Caitlin froze on the bed, covering herself with her hands. At first, he wanted to say something to her, but he changed his mind. There was no need for words. Everything was already understood. He left the apartment just as Emily started calling him, concerned about his long absence. He saw 3 missed calls and an unread message on his phone. The message read, "Where are you? Couldn't find the folder?" Without hesitation, he replied to his sister, found something else, and attached a photo of their spouses. His sister immediately called him and sobbed on the phone. He didn't know how to console either her or himself, so he simply listened to her crying in silence. Caitlin was waiting for him at home, silent and sad, looking at him with hope. But what was she hoping for? James was hurting twice, for himself and for his sister. Therefore, there could be no talk of forgiveness or acceptance of the situation. He sternly told her to pack up and find another place to live, and he would live with his parents during this time. "Don't tell Mom about us," his wife begged. "And do you think she won't notice?" James sadly smirked. A month later, they were sitting with their sister at a cafe near the local registry office, celebrating the beginning of a new life. The decision to divorce was harder for Emily than for her brother. James, on the other hand, only communicated with Caitlin on rare occasions, such as when important documents or matters arose. He had removed the cheater from his life, and his revenge warmed his heart. He asked an acquaintance who was knowledgeable in this area to send pictures, which he had taken at Emily's apartment, to the numbers in Caitlin's phone book. He knew he had acted poorly, but the idea of having punished his ex-wife in some way still brought him joy. Caitlin had to leave her job because the female members of the team turned away from her, and the men made suggestive comments. She was truly saddened by the loss of her job, as she had worked hard to get where she was. Caitlin was angry at James for what he had done, but even more so at herself. If she hadn't cheated on her husband, none of this would have happened. The cherry on top was the positive pregnancy test. When Caitlin saw the 2 lines, she burst into tears, sitting on the floor of the mall's bathroom. After informing Matthew, she expected to see joy on his face and hear words of support. Unfortunately, he was not prepared for such responsibility, and at the first opportunity, he fled from Caitlin, blocking her on all social media and adding her number to his blacklist. At that moment, the deceiver was left without support, face to face with her problem. What do you think about this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. And thank you for listening to the story until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and be sure to like this video, as it will help us promote the channel. All the best.